Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. I built my company from the ground up through years of blood, sweat, and tears. As the founder and CEO, I had the final say in every business decision. Things were running smoothly until one fateful day when Karen was hired as a manager. From day one, her entitled attitude grated on my nerves, but I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. The problem started on her very first week. I was going over quarterly sales projections when Karen suddenly burst into my office unannounced. Without even a greeting, she slapped a sheet of paper on my desk and demanded I sign it immediately. I picked it up. It was a new organizational chart showing Karen as the head of the company, promoted above me. "What is the meaning of this?" I asked in disbelief. She huffed impatiently. "It's time this company gets taken in the right direction. I clearly have better leadership skills, so I'm taking over. Sign the paperwork to make it official." I stood up, outraged. "You can't just appoint yourself as head of the company. I'm the founder and CEO here. You're way out of line." Karen's face turned red with anger. "How dare you talk back to me like that? I order you to sign these documents at once." I folded my arms. "Absolutely not. You're delusional if you think I'll hand over my company to you." She shook with rage. "You incompetent fool. If you won't obey me, then you're fired." I almost laughed at the audacity. "I'm afraid that's not how this works. Now return to your desk before I call security." Karen let out a frustrated shriek, and before I could react, she slapped me hard across the face. "You'll regret disobeying me," she yelled and stormed off. I stood there in stunned silence, my cheek stinging. I knew Karen had attitude issues, but this was beyond crazy. I immediately called my lawyer and recounted the disturbing incident. He advised me to be proactive in case Karen tried anything else irrational. So I notified security and sent out a company-wide email stating that Karen did not have authority to make business decisions or personnel changes. Over the next few days, Karen doubled down on her delusions of grandeur. She scolded employees for not addressing her as Boss Karen and tried to override several of my direct orders. Whenever confronted, she would throw a hissy fit about people not respecting her authority. Things escalated when I returned to the office one Monday to find Karen sitting in my office chair. She had printed new business cards that said Karen, Chief Executive Officer. An office-wide email announced her as the new CEO and demanded all staff comply with her wishes. Enough was enough. I marched straight to her office, security in tow. "Karen, you are relieved of your duties, effective immediately. Please gather your personal belongings and leave the premises at once." Her face turned beet red. "You can't fire me. I'm the CEO," she shrieked. I nodded to security. "Escort her from the building." Karen kicked and flailed as they dragged her out. "You'll pay for this. The company needs me," she screamed. I watched in satisfaction as she was thrown out onto the street. I wasted no time contacting the authorities about her irrational behavior and assault. With multiple employees willing to provide statements, the police soon arrested Karen and charged her with battery, criminal trespassing, and attempted fraud. At the court hearing, Karen kept ranting that as CEO she couldn't be prosecuted. The judge was not impressed. Karen was swiftly found guilty on all counts. "Your actions show a profound disconnect from reality and clear disdain for the law," the judge berated her. "I hereby sentence you to 180 days in jail and order you to undergo psychiatric counseling." Karen collapsed in hysterical sobs as bailiffs dragged her away. With Karen gone, peace was restored at my company. I sent out a company-wide memo reassuring everyone that the leadership structure would remain unchanged. I also instituted new hiring protocols to prevent another power-hungry lunatic from infiltrating our ranks. As for Karen, her legal troubles were just beginning. I sued her for damages and emotional distress. The lawsuit was a slam dunk with witnesses and evidence stacked against her. The judge awarded me a hefty settlement which I donated to charity, minus the portion covering my medical bills for stress-induced migraine medication. Last I heard, Karen remains unemployed and banned from our office building. Her name is notorious in our industry as the manager who tried to steal an entire company out from under its founder. As for me, I make sure to carefully vet any new hires for signs of delusion or entitlement. With sane, competent people around me, my company continues to thrive and grow. But I will never forget the havoc created by the crazy Karen who thought she could just appoint herself CEO. It just goes to show, business hierarchies exist for good reason, to stop power-hungry lunatics from seizing control. The next one is a pro-revenge story. My first job out of college was for a local TV station. The owner was, and still is, the worst human being I've ever met. This guy has money, but he will cheat and lie, anything to get out of paying his bills. When I started working there, the owner had just signed a contract with DirecTV to become part of their broadcast package. Since they were at the time purely a local TV station, this meant that we had about 2 months to upgrade our system so that we can start broadcasting to DirecTV customers in the entire Bay Area. Every day that we fail to do this past the deadline means that the owner would suffer a penalty, per the contract. Not knowing about how any of this works, the owner hired a friend of mine to come in as a freelance consultant. My friend told him that for about $15,000, he can get a system that will automate the entire process, which of course this guy didn't want to pay. He tasked my friend with finding a cheaper way, around half, and to pay for all the hardware up front and get reimbursed later. Knowing what a piece of crap this guy is, I warned my friend not to front the money because he wouldn't get paid back. The guy just smiled and said, "Watch me." So he made it work. We went live on schedule, and the owner was happy. Then my friend went in and presented the guy with the bill. Immediately, the usual excuses started. "Oh, I'm a little short this month. Can I pay you later?" Etc. Etc. Then my friend pulled out the trump card. Not only did my friend threaten to take all the equipment back and take the station off the air, but he also revealed that to get the uplink working for cheap, someone had to come in every day and code the broadcast manually. It's not a terribly complicated procedure, takes less than 5 mins. But of course, no one else at the station knows how to do it but him. So either the owner can pay him what he's owed, plus a $2,000 month consulting fee, or the station goes dark, and he starts paying the penalty to DirecTV. The ducker paid fast. So instead of $15,000, he ended up shelling out more than double that amount as my friend lapped up his $2,000 month fee for close to a year before he felt bad and finally taught someone there how to do it. Moral of the story: only thinking about short-term gain will always cost you more in the long run. The next one is a petty revenge story. I used to be a Boy Scout leader. Our chartering organization was a church. An integral part of the church building was a multi-purpose room that included high ceilings and a wooden floor striped for basketball, volleyball, and whatever else. Basically a full-court basketball court that could be used for other stuff. One week, our scout meeting involved a lively game of basketball because why not, right? At one point, I ducked out of the gym to get a drink of water. I was accosted by a Karen, and we had this conversation while I headed to the water fountain and back to the gym. "You're the leader of those boys, right?" "Yes, ma'am." "Well, don't you think they're being too loud?" My brain skidded to a halt. "It's a gym, and we're playing basketball. Duh." "No, ma'am. This is a regular scout meeting." "This is a church building. I think you would have some reverence and respect." I thought for a moment. The boys weren't running through the halls or the sanctuary. There were no other meetings going on in the building, except for the pastor, who was in his office counseling with parishioners. The rest of the building was dark and silent. Sounds to me like they're just making a joyful noise unto the Lord, and rejoicing in the bodies that God has blessed them with. I admit I wasn't sincere when I said this, but I didn't care. "Well, we'll see what the pastor has to say about this. I'm sure he doesn't appreciate you encouraging the boys to be so irreverent in the house of the Lord." Please read it aloud in a Karen voice. So I mumbled some kind of whatever response and headed back into the gym. I went to center court and called the boys around me. "Some lady out in the lobby thinks you boys are being too loud." Their faces fell. Oh, they looked sad. "Well, I don't think you're being loud enough. I want to hear some noise." They started whooping and yelling, and we went back to the game with gusto. About 5 minutes later, one of the doors opened, and the pastor stuck his head in. He looked around, grinned, and waved at his son, then closed the door and went back to his office. I didn't see Karen again. I guess she had to go home and whitewash her sepulcher or something. The next one is a malicious compliance story. When I was a little girl, I was pretty sickly. I often was sent home early from school with fevers caused by tonsillitis or strep throat. One day when I was about 7, I had a fever and had to be sent home again. My mother was unable to come get me, so she asked her father, my Opa, to do it. This was an unusual circumstance. Opa was a mean old bastard, and no one in the family really liked him. He was a hard-ass German war veteran who didn't mind slapping kids around or scaring the bejesus out of them. He took me back to his house and told me to start helping him make dinner, even though I was sick. We were going to make split pea soup, and I needed to start by washing and peeling potatoes for him. I put the potatoes in a bowl, filled it with water, and started scrubbing. He was sitting on a kitchen chair with a colander in his lap, not particularly paying attention to what I was doing, and told me to pour the potatoes into the colander so I could get started with washing them. I looked back at my bowl of potatoes submerged in dirty water and said, "Opa, that's not a good idea." Opa, who never liked to be told what is and isn't a good idea, screamed at me to put the potatoes in the colander, motioning to the very colander sitting in his lap. I had a choice to make. I could explain the situation and avoid the fiasco, or I could just do exactly what he told me to. So I shrugged and said, "Okay," and dumped the entire bowl of potatoes and dirty water into the colander. As I'm sure you can all imagine, the cold, dirty water spilled all over that mean old curmudgeon and his kitchen floor. Opa sat there, dumbfounded and covered in dirty potato water, for what felt like hours. I also stood there stupidly gawking in front of him in horror, the now empty bowl still upside down in my hands. Then he did what I never would have expected and started laughing. Somehow that was far more terrifying than if he exploded like I expected him to. He told me to clean up the mess and get out of his sight. And that's the story of my plucky, albeit foolish, malicious compliance, and possibly my first brush with death, ha ha ha. The next one is an entitled people story. This morning, I was out mowing my lawn. I happened to be wearing a ratty t-shirt that had a logo from a video game that I enjoy playing. We live in a very small town in northern Wisconsin. Everyone just kind of minds their own business, so we have never had much interaction with any of our neighbors, which is fine with us. One of the houses next to ours is a rental property that the owners converted into a duplex. The bottom half is empty, and there are 2 adults, male and female, who live in the upper unit with 2 kids. I have never spoken to the parents, as they have never made an attempt to even give the neighbor wave when we see them outside. However, this morning, the mom starts walking over towards me, so I stop the lawnmower and say good morning. She comments about how we have such a big house. I tell her it is because we like having lots of pets, 4 cats and 2 dogs, and that we usually adopt animals with medical issues since I am a nurse and my niece is a vet. We make a little more chit-chat and go about finishing mowing the lawn. I go inside to do some other chores, and I hear a knock on the door. I check the cameras, and there are 2 kids standing at my door. I make it a policy not to interact with children who do not have a parent with them, especially because I am a gay man, and with the current political state, it is better to be safe than sorry. So I ignore the knocks and continue with my chores. A few minutes go by, and the woman I spoke to earlier in the yard is standing there, so I open the door. She is upset that I ignored her children when they came over, as they wanted to play with our pets. I told her that I would never allow children in my house who do not have an adult with them and that our pets were not playthings for her children. So then she asked if they could play video games since I must be a gamer because of the shirt I had on. I reiterated that I would never allow children without an adult with them into our home. She then starts going on about needing some alone time because her boyfriend left her and she is the only one on the lease because he has bad credit and she cannot afford her rent and she just needs some time to herself. I apologize that she is having a rough time, but my husband and I would not be willing to entertain her children for her. She looked perplexed for a bit, and I was curious as to what confused her, and then she said something that made me lose it in a major way. She said, "Gross. Why do fags have to be my neighbors?" I replied, "Look here, you nasty person, you will never say that to me or my husband again. You need to leave right now." And I slammed the door in her face. She kept pounding on our door, screaming all kinds of slurs and obscenities. Because we have had some issues with kids destroying property, we have cameras all over the outside of our house. So I turned on the alarm on all of them. She got the message then and left. Like, what the actual fudge? I have never been so glad to have cameras everywhere outside. The next one is an entitled parent story. Years ago, my cousin Lucy and I had a strained relationship because she let her son Damien do anything he wanted, never punished him, and brushed away anything he ever did as boys will be boys or he's just a kid, etc. It came to a breaking point between us when Lucy and Damien were visiting years ago. Damien was 12 at the time, and my daughter Maggie was 9. Maggie was sitting happily playing her Xbox in her bedroom upstairs. While Lucy and I were talking, Damien got bored and wandered off. A few minutes later, I heard screaming and crying. I rushed up to Maggie's room to find her on the floor, blood all over her face, while Damien was just casually playing the Xbox. It turns out he came up and demanded a turn on the Xbox. Maggie said, "Sure, just let me finish the level." So he snatched the controller from her hand and smashed her around the face with it, then shoved her out of the way. I rushed her to the hospital. Luckily, it looked worse than it was, and there was no lasting damage, and I live in the UK, so no medical bills. But I was furious. I told Lucy what Damien did, and she shrugged and said, "You know how boys are with their video games, she should have just let him play." I told her in no uncertain terms that she and her son were not allowed anywhere near me or my family. We got into a huge fight over this, where she, of course, tried to absolve her little angel of anything. So I lost it and told her if she didn't discipline him and teach him boundaries, she would end up raising a monster who would grow up to be a thug or worse, which infuriated her. This caused fallout with the family for years, largely because Lucy lied and told everyone her son and Maggie had just been play fighting, and that's how she got hurt. It was just an accident, and I was overreacting. After a few years, everyone forgot. I still forbade Lucy or her son from coming anywhere near me. Several other family members did the same. I can't imagine why. Fast forward to a little before the pandemic. Damien was 19. Just like I predicted, he soon learned that thanks to his mother, he was bulletproof, as she would never believe he did anything wrong. So his behavior got worse and worse, to the point where he was kicked out of every school in the area and had to go to a special school. I got a call from Frank, Lucy's brother, telling me Lucy had been rushed to the hospital, that he knows we don't talk, but Lucy was seriously hurt and he wanted to let me know. Despite our history, I went to visit Lucy, accompanied by Frank and his wife. Before this, we had been really close, and I was upset to hear she was hurt. When I got there, I was shocked by what I saw. She was really banged up, her face swollen, bruises all up her arms. It turned out Damien had done this. She was really struggling for money and he refused to get a job, so she finally tried to lay down the law and tell him to get a job or she was throwing him out, so he attacked her, almost dislocated her jaw. It was horrific. Now we had a history, but at this point none of that mattered. I was worried and sad for her. I immediately asked her if she needed help with anything. She seemed surprised, but we ended up all having a really heartwarming chat, with her saying how much it meant to her that I came to see her. I thought maybe we were turning a corner and could repair our relationship. We had been really close as kids. Oh, how wrong I was. A few weeks later, I started getting blasted on social media and getting nasty messages and texts, telling me what an awful person I was, and how could I do what I did to Lucy. I was confused. I hadn't done anything. I called Frank. He had no idea either, but said he would look into it. Turns out Lucy had told everyone I had come to the hospital and mocked her, gloating, "I told you so," while she bawled her eyes out. I confronted Lucy about it, asking her how she could lie like that. She hit back that this was all my fault. It's what I deserved. If I knew this was going to happen, why didn't I do more to help her? She then demanded I pay her at least £10K for damages I caused. Like WTF. She lied to everyone because she couldn't stand that I had been right and decided to punish me for it. For months I endured hateful messages from family members who believed her lies. Not all my family believed her, of course, and Frank and his wife cleared things up about what really happened. He managed to record Lucy admitting that she lied, which got most off my back, but there were still a few relatives who had it in their heads that there's no smoke without fire, and I must have done something to make her say what she did. But they're all distant relatives on her side, so who cares? Then the pandemic rolled around. Everyone forgot the petty squabbles Lucy and her lies caused. But last month we held a family gathering at my parents', the first in years due to the pandemic. Lucy showed up. Thankfully, Damien was absent on account of serving a prison sentence for aggravated assault and battery, unrelated to what he did to his mother. I went to ask Lucy how she was doing. The first words out of her mouth were, "You need to pay me what you owe me. If you don't, I'm taking you to court. I need that money, it's the least you can do for ruining my life." She followed me around the party demanding I pay her, telling everyone who would listen that I'd ruined her life. What a happy family reunion. The next one is an entitled people story. Throughout my childhood, from when I started school to about age 18, I would ask my mom what she wanted for Mother's Day, and every year she would say very clearly, "Nothing. You don't need to get me anything at all. And so I didn't because I was a child, and she was my mom, and I believed what she said. In my teens, I just assumed it wasn't something she felt was important. I'm an only child, and my lovely dad who lived with us wasn't one for social conventions and didn't intervene. I'm not sure why, but at the age of 18, I started buying her a Mother's Day card and present, which always went down well with her. After I had my own son, my mom decided to tell me that every Mother's Day that she didn't receive a present, she would hide away and cry because I hadn't bought her anything, and that everyone else had a lovely present and card except her. What's going on here? I'm 48 now, and still feel weird about both her not telling child-aged me that she'd like some flowers or whatever, and also that she told adult-aged me about how I'd made her cry each year. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.